Welcome to Pub in the Desert, where we bring you honest, curious conversations about faith and the human experience. I'm Matthias Miller, here again with my co host, Kevin David Grittner. Before we dive in, I want to recap our three guiding principles once again. Number one, you don't need to be fixed. You need to be known, and we believe that love is knowing and being known. Second, we approach difficult topics with genuine curiosity. We aren't here to win arguments, we're here to understand. And third, we don't come with preset agendas. We let conversations unfold naturally, and we follow where authenticity leads us. So go ahead, pull up a chair, grab a drink, and let's explore what union looks like with God, with others, and with ourselves. So, Kevin, I want you to kind of, I guess, share with our listeners what you were talking to me about this theme that's been emerging in your conversations this past week.
Yeah, yeah. To be fair, emerging in my conversations and in myself and just kind of in the world around me, not specifically other people's problems. And a we about it. We were talking about desires and these things that we long for, these things that we hope for, these things that we have that we've maybe tried to get rid of, they haven't gone away, all the messiness of being human. And in the conversations and in my walks with Clive and in my thought, I started to think, and I'm curious about this and your viewpoint on this. Like, to me, the desire isn't the problem. Those desires, those longings are generally for something that is very sacred and holy when you dig down past all of it. Whether it's acceptance, belonging, connection, peace, joy, whatever, freedom, whatever it is, the big picture existential things. I think the issue for most of us is how we go about it. And I think I love when people say this. They'll say, like, there's two type of people in this world. Because I think there's an infinite number of two type of people in this world scenarios.
Not wrong.
But I think there's two ways of approaching this, or there's two types of people in this world. I have this desire, and it's up to me to fulfill. And so I have to go about it. And that's something I'd like to dive into. What does that look like? When I have this desire, I have to go about fulfilling it. And then I have this desire, and I recognize that God gave me these desires, the desire for acceptance and belonging and union and connection and freedom and all those things. And I go to Him and I allow those things to be fulfilled through Him. So instead of two types of people, two paths, maybe wide path, narrow path, that kind of thing. And in my experience, and in those I was talking to, particularly this week, the path where I have to fulfill my desires gets really, really messy, and I never get to what it is that actually needs to be fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
And this path where I go to God and I sit with Him and I'm patient and I wait, and He fulfills much longer, much harder. And we're rarely able to consistently do that over and over and over again. But those who are, that's their general direction. Like Eugene Peterson would say, a long obedience in the same direction. Like my long obedience is that way, and I take detours, but it's that way. They seem to receive those things that they were hoping for. But here's the fascinating thing to me. Rarely, if ever, in the way they thought those things would be achieved or received. Because achieved is up to us. Received.
I think, so two observations with that. One is perhaps there needs to be a little bit of nuance because there's also people who pray incessantly for God to fulfill these desires, but never actually themselves pick up their feet and move towards whatever it is that wherever God is taking them.
Yeah.
And so there is this relational, dynamic, interactive element. In some ways, it's almost easier to see when you take it out of these concepts of acceptance and some of the concepts that you shared and turn it into something of a more tangible type of desire. And I mean, I think I think there's some desires that you can look at unequivocally that looking at some very deeply rooted desires, um, and almost all of our desires end up being distorted, some distortion of a true God-given desire. Um,
Right.
I think one of the things that I think is helpful to think about in here is that I think desire ends up being a tool that God uses to provoke motion.
Right.
And so most of the desire that we have is centered around, either avoidance of pain or pursuit of pleasure. And in a healthy experience of those desires, there is a move towards from where we are to something that is closer to what God has for us, for lack of a better way to describe it. So, in addition to that, just also an observation that just the fact that a desire is tainted doesn't mean that God doesn't use that desire, and that we can have let's pick the example of our desire for safety and security may compel us to go in a particular direction. It might be just maybe it's some kind of direction with our career, and um, the fact that our movement is towards something that doesn't actually end up deeply satisfying that desire in the way that we hoped it would, I find that, or I have found in my experience, God has consistently used those types of movements and to to guide and redirect almost better than some kind of ethereal in my head, I don't know, a prayer at the top of a mountain that he would somehow provide that for me.
Right. Right. Yeah. As you were talking, it brought me back to James chapter 4. Uh, I think it's 2 through 3, where he says, "You do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures."
Right.
And I wonder, like, because when you were saying, like, people who pray fervently for something, and don't receive it, like, how do we apply what James says to that process? Because on the outside, it's very devout,
Right.
even well-meaning. There's no malice there.
And many times it's very biblical and very scriptural. There's a lot of examples that we could give of those types of things.
Yeah. Because the contrast to that is, a contrast, not the contrast, is Abraham. The promise was there, the desire was there. You will be a father. And then there's the waiting and the waiting and the waiting. And they finally just have had enough with it and go, just sleep with my maid. Just sleep with Hagar. Like you get anticipation fatigue.
Hmm.
And this came up in something I was writing recently, this thought of like covenant amnesia. Like the further away you get from it, the harder it is to remember the promise, especially with the circumstances flowing in front of us. Like, and so in that sense, is righteousness not remembering? So those are all the thoughts swirling through my head as you were
So,
talking.
so how do we tease this apart? Because even to pick on Abraham, this was a promise from God. This
Yeah.
wasn't a question of whether it was just his own, um, you know,
His
his
own desire.
own desire, yeah, his own self-inspired vision and grand ideal. It wasn't that.
Or David, same thing. Like Samuel comes to his house and anoints him king. You will be king. The voice of God, the prophet of God, comes to him and says, the last prophet of God in that time frame comes to him and says, you're going to be king. Anoints him, but not yet. Be patient. Same thing.
Um, Little side note: I've had people make the argument. I can't remember if we talked about this on the podcast. People make the argument that David was too patient, that God gave him all of these opportunities to kill Saul, and he should have taken them.
That's a dangerous argument.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah. Because look at that. We could rabbit trail for a while here. So stop me before I go too far. Look at the potential outcome for that thought process.
Yeah.
Where does patience go? I could justify in my brain when I feel like I've had enough pain, I've had enough waiting, I've had enough agony, all that kind of stuff, that I've just been too patient. Now I have to take over.
Right.
It's fascinating. Over the last 2 months, talked a lot about running on this, but there's something fascinating happened over the last 2 months for me. For the years and years and years I've been running, my goal is to get faster, to finish faster, and just push and push and push. And inevitably, I get hurt somewhere along the process. And then I have to not run for a month, 2 months, 3 months maybe, till I'm healed. And then I have to start back from zero and go. Now, I'm not saying this is from God, but like this is what I feel deeply inside me is I actually have to train slower. So yesterday I had an 8 mile run preparing for a half marathon. This is the training. Now, the training program I'm using says I want you to do this at a conversational pace. Well, for me, conversational at this stage is probably between 8.5 and 9 minutes per mile. That's conversational. I could still, if we were running together, I could still look at you and communicate an idea without gasping. But here's what I felt inside. No, slow down. Slow down. So I had to run. I had to. I felt I needed to run between 10.5 and 11.5 minutes per mile for 8 miles. And I did. And I'm thinking about it and I'm processing and I'm questioning. And the only words that come to me as I think about it and pray about it and process it is patience. I love you.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to go faster.
Yeah.
But what happens when I go faster? I get hurt. Patience. I love you.
That's fascinating. I wonder, we've had various conversations. I've brought this up at various points online and offline around creativity. I'm realizing now as you're talking, and I'm thinking back over some experiences this past week, over the last six weeks or so, even longer. There are moments when I don't really feel that creative. And this is coming from, I've had many people tell me that, for context, I don't know, this is just, I've gotten feedback from other people about my creativity. And I'm just looking at myself and I'm like, I don't feel that creative. Like, what's wrong with me? And what's occurring to me is that there's a portion of my creativity, as you're talking, there's a portion of my creativity that was driven by urgency. So I want this particular problem solved And so, what are all the possible different ways that I can solve it? And I'm going to go pick one. I'm going to go run with it and see where this leads. And not shockingly, many of these paths that I've chased have ended up being dead ends. It's not
Right.
that dissimilar from your running. It's like I run and I hurt myself, either get super distracted, you spend a lot of time, money, attention chasing this
Yeah.
in the end. And for what?
Right.
So there's something almost viscerally painful about slowing down. And there's also something um, nobody ever looks at you in any season of preparation and says, "Yeah, good job. Like you're going so slow. Like
Right. Go slower.
slower."
It reminds me of that scene from the movie Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Guy goes on vacation he's just broke, his girlfriend's just broken up with him. He's all in his head. He's had a rough time. Decides to go to Hawaii. Plot twist, she ends up being there with her new boyfriend. But he's trying to escape this. So he goes out and he's like, he's going to take a surf lesson. And the guy he's taking the surf lesson, he just kind of like a stoner, like beach guy, all that kind of stuff. He's teaching him. And so they start out on the beach and he's like, okay, you're laying down on the board, the wave comes, you paddle, you pop up. And so he like tries to pop up, he falls over, he goes, no, that's too fast. And he pops up again and he goes, too fast. And he pops up again, and it's just getting slower each time. Pops up again, too fast. And then he's just laying there. And the guy goes, it's too slow. You actually got to stand up. It's like what life is like too fast, too fast, too fast. Okay, I'll just stay here. No, you actually got to do something.
Right.
Like, what's that like? When I first started running a number of years ago, golly, when was it? Probably seriously running, probably 2015. So maybe 10, 11 years ago. I was looking for I went out and did it on my own. Wasn't doing great. You figure we should know how to run, all that kind of stuff. I was like, I gotta find how other people are doing this. So I came across a book called Born to Run. And one of my favorite books all the time, I call it my running Bible. Um, and he tells this story, fabulous book if you haven't read it. Anything that guy writes, I forget his name, Christopher. I don't know. We'll put it in the show notes. It's called Born to Run. Um, he tells the story of a Czechoslovakian guy living under communist rule, named Emil Zatopek. And this guy just loved to run. Even when it was snowing and cold outside, he'd run in place in his little dorm room. And he would practice running through snow. He would practice carrying his wife as he's running, all these things. And you can actually see YouTube videos of this guy running. This was, I think, in the 60s or 70s. He runs like it's a yard sale. It's not poetry in motion. It's like his knees going this way, his arms going that way. But this guy won pretty much every race he was ever entered in. And he tells this story that he's running the marathon for the first time. And he's leading, or he's neck and neck with a guy. And this guy, I think he was a British guy, said, Emil looks at him and goes, hey, are we on pace? Are we too fast? What's the case? And this guy thinks, oh, I'm going to tell him we're too slow. So he takes off running and tires out. So Emil just looks at him and goes, okay, thanks. Takes off running, never stops. Wins the race, kind of thing. He just had this love for it.
Right.
He didn't know the right form. He didn't know, he had never been trained. He just taught himself how to do this thing. And he was one of the greatest distance runners of all time. And it's do we get so analytical in our faster, in our urgency, in all this that we just analyze ourselves into an injury?
Right.
So to resonate with what you're saying, like the things you want to accomplish, the urgency of it, I'm chasing this thing and I end up injured at the end. Oh, okay. Well, do I learn something from that? Well, maybe, but maybe I learned the wrong lesson. And so I try it again. It doesn't work. And I try it again. It doesn't work. And I wonder if that's how we are as human beings, that we try again and again and again, and we're not learning the lesson we need to learn.
One thing that's pretty striking about what you're describing is that he's doing it for the love,
For the love of it.
and I think there's so much rationalization. I mean, I've been around these. There's so much of these schools of thought in the personal development space. Is like, what's kind of your whatever you want to call it. Different people have different things. Unique ability, superpower, fill in the blank, and then can you discover it? Can you build on top of it? And it all sounds fine and good. The problem is, in my experience, many people are really bad at, well, I'll say this. I'm really bad at self-identifying that.
Hmm.
In my
Me
experience,
too.
people around me.
You're not alone.
So, and when you let go of trying to analyze that and just follow, I mean, it's the scary thing because the analysis is kind of those are the safety rails, I suppose, of life, and and whatever this whatever that I don't know how to describe it, that way of living and measuring is a safety rail. And it's terrifying to let go of that, but there really isn't any way to discover um, that sense of being born to run or whatever the born to do is for you,
Yeah, whatever the thing is.
whatever the thing is, and without letting go of that.
Yeah.
And so maybe there's kind of these swirling thoughts around desire. If you want to tie it back to desire, part of the pain of desire is the imposed urgency and time frame that we place on it, and also the imposed expression of it, like you said, um, and also the distortion of. Um, I think many of us, at least for me, and I suspect this is more broadly applicable than just myself, but many of us have a very difficult time imagining what, unless you kind of had this very specific type of skill set and fell into it early on and managed to find yourself in a tribe of people who really embodied that in an excellent way. Many of us end up with a really bad imagination of what we could become, and so we end up attaching desires and ideals to this certain thing that's celebrated in culture or in our in the culture at large or in micro cultures.
Yeah. 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 I It reminds me of a conversation I had recently with a guy. That the conversation actually haunts me in that I can't stop thinking about it. He was he was born, and for the majority of his life, up until his late 20s, early 30s, he didn't really know the true origin story, where he came from, kind of thing. And through a series of events, he came to see that his mom really didn't want him. He had two older siblings. They had what they needed, what they wanted, and a third one was a surprise. And his mom was actually quite open about it. And she fell into a depression and she couldn't take care of him, feed him, those kinds of things. And so he was in the hospital for quite a bit of time because of that. They call it failure to thrive now, but there wasn't language for it at that time. Long story short, he's coming back around to see that his whole life has been a desire for the connection he never had.
Right.
And he's idealized the connection in so many ways. This person will solve this for me. This person. And he's just had a series of friendships, relationships, mentorships, which have just disappointed him. But he was always looking for the thing that would fulfill this desire inside him. And I think this is probably where the thought process around desire and the wrestling with it started a few weeks ago. But he came to the conclusion that even his version of relationship with God was idealized because it should feel a certain way,
Right.
and it wasn't. And he had felt a lot of guilt and shame about that. What's wrong with me that it doesn't feel this way? Well, the problem as he saw it was A, what is it supposed to feel like? And B, was the not feeling it because the desire was so obsessive. And it's been that conversation has haunted me since I had it. And I think haunted me in the best way because it's thinking through human beings and the needs we have and how they get met or don't get met and how shaping that is to us, to everyone who's ever lived.
Right. So let's play around with this for a little bit because it's very interesting that his perception of what it should be was shaped primarily in a vacuum.
Right.
And I mean, but isn't that true of most of our desires? It's not if I sit somebody who grows up in a well-to-do family doesn't sit around envisioning what wealth must be like,
Right.
right? Like
Mhm.
somebody who grows up in, I mean, just pick the contrast. They grow up in poverty. They have a certain perception of what it must be like to be wealthy.
Right.
Somebody who grows up in an environment where um, they experience secure attachment and love and care and all of the things, they never have this idealism of what this must feel like. But when you don't experience it, you have to for your mind to even know what to seek after. There has to be some kind of ideal created of this is what it must be like in order
Right.
to experience that. And so, ironically, rather than trying to meet the felt need, somewhere along the line we start trying to meet the ideal,
Right.
never recognizing that it was a completely false ideal to start with. It was grounded. It was our own imagination, not grounded in any kind of reality. It's kind of a fascinating.
It was, it seems to me, I'd be curious to get your opinion on it. Like, what was it grounded in? It seems to me the grounded of the idealistic fantasy is all in the opposite of what I experienced.
Right.
I experienced this, it should be like this. I experienced this, it should be like this. And in how many ever iterations of that for the individual person?
Well, and, I mean, don't you see this? You probably know this better than I do, but don't you see this playing out in relationships? So if you have somebody who grows up in an environment where nobody ever has time for them, like we've been around the people where they then like the expectation is that somebody like whoever they are friends with or they're in a relationship with or whatever, they're going to spend all of their time with them, and it
Right.
being a very suffocating equal and opposite reaction to the void that they felt.
Right.
Is
Well,
that
in certain
yeah,
circles, the Five Love Languages book has been super popular for a very long time. And I wonder if we actually understand what's going on there. How did that become my love language? Whether it's gifts or words of affirmation or touch or, however it is, how did that become my love language? Is it possible that that was developed out of lack? And there's a desire for it, and the desire is holy, but I need that from you to fulfill this need in me.
right. Well, here's your next fascinating study that you can do.
I'll add it to the list.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a fascinating concept. I mean, if I had to think for myself, I think um, it's sometimes some ways it's so much more basic too. Like the most natural love languages to express are the ones that were habitually formed in you through your family culture,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And then implicitly, the ones that you crave the most are the ones that were most noticeably absent.
Yeah. Right. And there's a hunger and thirst for that. To use the Beatitude language, there's a hunger and a thirst for that, not for righteousness, but for that thing that I lacked, that I didn't get. Or maybe I did, but it wasn't in the way I wanted it, or
Right.
however it was fulfilled. But could we see those love languages, the desires of us human beings flowing out of lack? And does that provide insight to us, to our actions?
Right. Well, and this, I'm trying to. Okay, so, question to you then is, as you've addressed more of those. Oh, okay, let me take a step back. I've been in environments where love languages were emphasized to the point of it being weird.
Hmm.
Um, like, oh, we have to like affirm people because if you don't affirm people, then they just crumble. Like,
Right.
what kind of person? I mean, I don't mean this might sound terrible, but what kind of person is that? Like, are we not more resilient? Is there not a world in which we can be more resilient than that? Uh,
Right.
like, do you really want everybody living for the praise of the next person? And and um, and I understand how we get there. Like that's and no fault or blame or shame in experiences that lead you that have led you there, but there's an opportunity to move beyond that. So the question to you would be, like, have you found yourself, what's your experience been like with love languages as through the your your journey of maturing?
Yeah. Yeah. It never really resonated with me.
Mm,
The whole idea of love languages, like I thought we should be doing that for each other all the time.
right.
You know, as I've gone further, like it makes sense to me. But if I make that choice that this is my love language and this is what I need to feel loved, I'm ignoring the idol that I'm creating. Because everybody is going to rise and fall depending on their providing me or not providing me with something.
Mm,
That seems to be an utterly selfish mindset.
right.
You didn't give me this, so I'm angry with you, but I won't tell you about it, or I'll coerce and manipulate to get it. Isn't this like the unfulfilled desire? It's in my hands. And maybe I tried to communicate it and you didn't do what I thought you should do.
Right.
And then maybe I get a little creative and I start to utilize these certain things, these methods, in order to get what I want.
Right.
Yeah, to me, it's and here's the thing, like, and I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. I think a lot of psychologists, be they Christian, secular, whatever, a lot of self-help gurus, especially in our culture with social media the way it is, I think they have a lot to say about deeply insightful psychological dynamics within people. But the problem is, if you go on Twitter, you go on Instagram, you go on TikTok, you get a clip that's 10 seconds long. There's no deep wrestling with it. There's no intuitive experiential knowledge around it. It's like, no, that sounds right to me. That's what I need to do. And
Right.
I've seen this with the five love languages. I've seen it with boundaries. I've seen it with these concepts, which are deeply important concepts to wrestle with. But we want a quick fix. There's an urgency to it. Like I read this book, The Five Love Languages, and it solved every problem I had. Really? It really did? Or I saw this spiritual director, or I saw this therapist, I saw this counselor, I saw this doctor, I went through this treatment and it solved everything.
Okay, Kevin, it may make
No.
you in a relationship more functionally acceptable. Is that okay?
Right, right. Yeah. Why would no? That's not how these things work.
Right.
Those things become an idol to me. And I hear a lot of language on social media around the idea that, oh, this person's toxic. You don't need to be around them. I have my peace over here. And I wonder how much of that is how is that person toxic because they were challenging your narrative?
Right.
Not always. I mean, I'm not denying the fact that there are, people who are so deep within their wounding that they wound others. I'm no, I've been alive long enough, done the work I've done long enough to be able to understand that. But do I live in the place of we, union, knowing and being known, or do I live in the place of fixing? If I live in the place of fixing something and I come across boundaries or I come across the five love languages, that's going to be the lens through which I see. Which, if you are not being challenged by somebody that you respect, then that's going to become a very selfish worldview, lens through which you see the world. Because at that point, my boundaries become God. My love language becomes God. And if you're not appeasing that God, if you're not sacrificing to that God, then you have no place here with me.
Right.
So I just cut people off. And I have all sorts of theological justifications about why I can cut people off. But Jesus is very clear, especially in Matthew 18 and numerous other places. If you have a problem with something, you have to go to them and you have to talk it out. It's not a one-time conversation, it's a continual conversation. And scripture says that if they listen, you've made progress. Not if they agree with you, if they listen. All that whole process is getting to know the person. And so, like, can I get to know the disordered desires in myself and in others? And by disordered, I mean I have taken it upon myself to fulfill this desire, and you're standing in the way of me fulfilling this desire, so you're out.
Right.
Or do I bring these things to God, these disordered desires, these interactions, these relationships? What do I do here? And do I wait for Him to walk through that with me?
Yep.
I think that's the really interesting thing to wrestle with. Because when I look back at it, to go back to the whole running dynamic and what's been happening, why did I want to go faster? I wanted to go faster for selfish reasons. I wanted to win races. I wanted to be toned. I wanted to be fit. I wanted, like, whatever the case may be.
Isn't there a substantial element in relationships, running, really anything, where the test is really the ability to weather the storm?
Yes.
And I mean, fundamentally, running itself is that.
Weathering the storm. Yeah. Yeah. So the test is, at that point, resilience.
Right.
Do I trust? Do I have faith that no matter what I see here, that he's with me in it and we're going to continue to walk through it together? That's the test of any faith.
And it seems to me increasingly, like, I mean, this is fundamental to knowing and being known, but that fundamentally is there really anything much more fundamental than communication?
No, it's the cornerstone of everything. And I wonder how many of those disordered desires that I seek to uh, soothe via my own methods, if I was to communicate those things and allow myself to be in conversation about them, would I end up continuing to soothe them?
Hmm.
Or would they be soothed by the conversation,
Yeah.
by being known, by being heard?
I think one of the frustrating things about that is that there's a vulnerability that gets, like, it makes you vulnerable. Like,
Mhm.
I've there's something about finding a way to soothe your own ache that makes you feel powerful and independent.
Yeah.
And the moment that you bring somebody else in, I know from, yeah, I mean, just off from my own past experiences, sometimes it's like, um, it can be very easy then to diminish your own experience because, well, if it's soothed as simply as by communicating it with somebody, is it actually a thing?
Right. Yeah. I forget the name of the method, you may know, but there's this method of raising children, especially infants, that you let them cry it out. There's a name for it, but I forget what it's called.
You remember?
Yeah. And I remember hearing that once and thinking, if I was that child and I was in a crib and my diaper was full, or I was hungry, or I was scared, what method do I have to communicate that?
Right,
The only method I have is crying.
right.
And it sparked the thought of me when you said, like, soothe this yourself, become independent, become strong, like all these kinds of things. Yeah, there's a truth to that. There's a resilience in that. Of course there is. But what if I just needed to be held? Or I was hungry and that needed to be resolved. Or my diaper was full, that needed to be resolved. What if I'm communicating and what I'm communicating is ignored or responded to with anger?
Right,
What's that going to do to me internally?
right. Well, I think if you want to really unpack the complexity of it, is what happens when that cry comes from something that's not obvious?
Right. Right.
Because there's a sense of helplessness then at that point, because the child, um, if they're unless they simply give up, will continue to cry about whatever it is that's bothering them, and the parent, by whatever means, will try to figure out what it is, but won't be able to find it. So there's this hopeless catch 22 kind of situation. And I think so that we experience that as adults as well,
Yeah.
where there's some kind of ache and some kind of itch that we can't exactly identify or articulate, and the people around us perhaps don't have the lived experience to be able to identify.
Right.
So what do you do with that?
Because of their disordered desires, right? Lack of experience, learning the wrong lessons, some sort of disordered desire. It makes me think about a friend of mine going through a really tough time. Panic attacks, not sleeping, like many times felt like he's on death's door. And so we've committed to sit down and talk for as long as it took. And my whole thought process was just to hear him, to listen. And we've spent the last 6 weeks, and he had a lot to say. He had a lot of questions. He had a lot of experiences. He had a lot of confusing dynamics within his life. And to me, as you were talking, I saw him analogous to the baby that's in the crib crying. Will you listen? Will you come and understand me? Will you have a conversation with me? Now, the baby has the conversation in a different way. It's communicating,
Right.
but not in the language we can understand. But this guy in his 60s is communicating. But if you're listening to him via disordered desires, then you're going to miss what he's actually saying.
Can you can you explain?
Yeah. What he's trying to explain is I didn't have connection when I was younger.
Yeah.
My sole function was to soothe my own worries, fears, aches. I've done that for 6 decades, and I'm just breaking down because I want somebody to listen to me.
Right.
Now, he decided the way that he could get listened to was by helping others.
Yeah.
So he got into a helping profession. He learned everything he possibly could about it, expecting that the trade-off would be he would feel connected,
Right.
but it never happened.
Instead, there's an endless line of people who are waiting to extract something from him,
Yeah.
and often incapable of giving much back in return, just by virtue
Right.
of, yeah. Wow.
One of the profound moments was he looked at me towards the beginning and goes, "Do you think I should work?" Because work is the place where the wounding is happening over and over and over again. And I didn't answer the question. I was like, "Do you want to work? Do you feel like you should work?" And he sat and thought about it and he said, "No."
Mm.
I said, "There you go. There you go." So his disordered desire, the thing he was trying to achieve was this idealistic version of what connection would look like. And this is the road or the methodology he could use to get that, but it never worked. He had this profound moment a few weeks back, sitting on the couch. He's just in the midst of it. He's in it. And his son comes and sits next to him and puts his hand on top of his father's and just sits there. He didn't know for how long, but just sat there with his hand on his father's hand. And he describes that as a turning point. He didn't come asking for money or the car keys or anything like that. Just put his hand on his hand and sat there. And I wonder if in our urgency, our busyness, with our disordered desires and trying to fulfill them, if what God wants is for us is Psalm 46:10. Be still, and you will know that I'm God. But if there's urgency and there's disordered desires and I have to bring them about, then there is no time to be still and know that He is God. Zero time.
Yeah. Which is likely one of the reasons why I imagine Jesus disappearing from the crowds to somehow create space and create distance from the constant urgency of the moment.
Matthew McConaughey wrote a book a number of years back. I think it's called Green Light, something like that. And he tells the story in the introduction or the first chapter where he's just in it. It's all the acting and Hollywood and money and contract and all the stuff that comes along with that. So he decides he's going to go stay at a monastery for an extended period of time. He gets dropped off and he's walking up the path, and there's this older gentleman who's obviously like a priest or a lay brother or something, within the monastery, just sitting there. And he sits down next to him, no greeting, just starts talking. And he says he talks for a really, really long time. I forget the number, but it was I think it was like over an hour. He's talking. And finally it dawns on him that he's been talking this whole time and this guy has just been listening. He hasn't said anything or asked anything or that kind of thing. And he goes, I'm sorry, I'm being rude. I, haven't, asked you or talked to you or whatever. And he pauses, and the older man looks at him and goes, Me too. That's all he says. Me too. I wonder if that's what we want as human beings. To either be that person who can say me too, or to have that person in our lives who I can just unload and they say, me too.
Yeah. So bring this back around, if you don't mind, back to the original opening question. As one, fulfilling it by yourself, one, like, would you add any color to that? Well, the other one is allowing God to fulfill that in His time. Would you add any color to that based on our conversation? Are there any threads that you see emerging from to that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the big one is patience. that's been emerging as we've talked. Do
Yeah.
I need this thing right here and now? Or can I trust and have faith that this desire will be purified in the process and will be fulfilled at some point?
It makes me think of, I had a realization this past week. I think it's unsettling to me when I stop to think about the parts of the world that don't make sense to me.
Mm.
Um, Interactions, social rules, other types of things. And I'm like, that's very bizarre. And I had this, the triggered by several traffic um, interactions, for lack of a better term, this past week. And I'm like, how bizarre. I mean, like people have, I mean, between one guy, know, uh, running a red light, as I'm right before I go through the intersection, and observing my own response to that, and other types of things like that. And I'm like, it seems to me this is a little bit of an observation that I didn't fully tease apart, but it seems to me like impatience is often the protection against vulnerability of some kind.
Yeah.
Like it's
Right.
far better for me um, to be uh, an aggressive driver on the road than to fill in the blank, whatever the alternative is. Um,
Yeah.
um, it's far better for me to take the bull by the horns with whatever it is I want to accomplish than to risk the vulnerability of this thing not working out. It's much better for me to drive the conversation than to risk the awkwardness of silence, or you know somebody else taking the conversation where you don't want it to go, or any number of things. It seems so. There's kind of this emerging theme of like impatience is effectively a a quick cover, a quick band-aid, if you will, for discomfort.
Right. Yeah, the urgency to fix whatever is making me uncomfortable.
Right.
Right. That's impatience. And it makes sense. Like the baby is impatient because they're in a powerless position. And so, there's impatience there. But maybe we don't grow too far. Or maybe we don't grow as far away from that foundational stage as we think we do. I'm uncomfortable. It shouldn't be this way. I need to fix this. And here's how I've learned to fix it. Here's my methodology.
And to take that analogy even further, here's how I've learned to cope with my powerlessness.
Yeah, that's a
So,
statement right there.
or this is how I've been well, this is where I've been unwilling to acknowledge and accept my powerlessness.
Right. Right.
I feel like there's this big gap in my own life around truly understanding what it's like. Sounds weird even saying this because maybe it's not as dramatic as what I'm saying, but maybe it is. Truly understanding what it's like to be powerless. Like, wasn't much of Jesus' teachings, reminders, much of God's commands to the Israelites centered around remembering what life is like for those who are powerless.
Right.
And
Throughout the Old Testament, the refrain is always there. Take care of the aliens, the widows, and the orphans. And I don't think he specifically means just foreigners, people who have lost a spouse, and children who lost their parents. I think these three are a symbol of the powerlessness in our world that certain people experience.
And if you had to infer from its conversations with leaders, much of it came down to them forgetting to yield to wield their power with that kind of mindfulness.
Yeah. Well, it's it takes me back to the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. Jesus says, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Well, that word meek is actually more, the word used is more of a phrase than it is a word. It's a war metaphor. And it means essentially those who have a sword, know how to use it, but choose to keep it sheathed until it needs to be brought out, discerning when that is. And I think that's the reality for our world, especially for men in our world. We've been told that to be dangerous is a bad thing. But look at in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The three kids are at the Beaver's house and they're asking about Aslan. Is he good? Oh, yes, he's good. Is he dangerous? Oh, yeah, he's dangerous. They're talking about a character who they know has a sword and knows how to use it, but chooses to keep it sheathed. And later on, you see that. Where to get, I think it's Edmund, the middle boy, to get him back from the White Witch. Aslan has to sacrifice himself on the altar. Now, could he have gone in there and destroyed everybody and taken Edmund back? Yes, of course he could have. But he chooses this different way. And it's all about ordering my desires on what God is leading me to do. Because for the ego, yeah, I'd storm the castle, I'd kill the dragon, I'd overthrow, whatever the case may be. But that's my ego.
So I just have to note this. This came across my Substack feed today. Are you not thirsty? Said the lion. I'm dying of thirst, said Jill. Then drink, said the lion. May I? Would you mind going away while I do? Said Jill. The lion answered this only by a look and a very low growl. And as Jill gazed at his motionless bulk, she realized that she might as well have asked the whole mountain to move aside for her convenience. The delicious rippling noise of the stream was driving her nearly frantic. Will you promise not to do anything to me if I do come? Said Jill. I make no such promise, said the lion. Jill was so thirsty now that, without noticing it, she'd come a step nearer. Do you eat girls? She said. I have swallowed up girls and boys, women and men, kings and emperors, cities and realms, said the lion.
Mm.
It didn't say this as if it were boasting, nor as if it were sorry, nor as if it were angry. It just said it. I daren't come and drink, said Jill. Then you will die of thirst, said the lion. Oh dear, said Jill, coming another step nearer. I suppose I must go and look for another stream then. There is no other stream, said the lion.
There's a song. There's a lady named Sarah Sparks, and she started off just putting her music on YouTube. And then she grew quite popular and famous from that. But she wrote an entire album called Into the Lantern Waste. And every one of the songs is about a character from the Chronicles of Narnia. And she wrote a song called A Song for Jill. And it's essentially just a poetic version of what you just said. And it's very haunting. It's just a guitar and it's very slow. It's what you just said. I don't want to drink from that stream. because something in me knows what drinking from that stream would mean. And he looks at us and says, there is no other stream. You will die of thirst. And isn't that fascinating? In the Beatitudes later, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. What if that's the dividing line? You hunger and you thirst to remember for righteousness, for these things, and yet you come to the river and there's a lion there. I don't want you to see me drink from this river. Can I go to another part of the river? No. Wherever you go, whatever river you go to, I'm there. Remember who I am. Or the woman at the well at John 4, in John 4. Can I have a drink of water? Oh, how dare you ask me for a drink of water? I'm a Samaritan. You're a Jew. We don't do that. Oh, you don't know what I'm asking. If you were to ask me for water, I would give you living water and you would never thirst again. How are you going to give me water? You don't even have a bucket. You don't understand. That's some powerful stuff there.
And this all kind of ties back to your comment that you made earlier about desires being fulfilled, but never in the way that we had hoped.
Yeah.
Because it seems like to that point of him being good but not safe, there's always, it seems like he always leads us to this really uncomfortable place.
This place of death. Like, think about it. You can become a good person, which to me, metaphorically or visually, it's like I can approach the abyss and I can toe it. I can put my toes over the edge, but only falling into the abyss can I be transformed. And there's so much great imagery around it. If you look at the movie Interstellar, that at the end, Matthew McConaughey decides he's going to fall into the black hole. Or Gandalf in the Mines of Moria, he has to fall into the darkness and wrestle with the demon to be reborn. So he goes from Gandalf the Gray to Gandalf the White. And it's funny when they first come across him in the forest of Fangorn and he reappears, they go, Gandalf, the Gray, or you're white now, whatever he goes. And he has this moment in the movie where he goes, it's like he's looking somewhere else. He goes, oh, yeah, that used to be me. Like he had forgotten that old thing, like echoing Paul, like forget what's in the past.
Yes.
Well, that's who I am now. Like that whole thing is just forgotten. It's in the past. It's over. In the God, I didn't know how much I have been thinking about this last week. In the book The Silmarillion, how creation gets corrupted essentially is there's this place where the elves live where they don't die. I forget the name of it, and all you Tolkien enthusiasts, you're going to hate me because I can't remember the name of it, but forgive me, please. And they're all yelling at the screen right now. It's especially my closest friend. He's in the midst of getting a master's degree in Tolkien studies, essentially, right now. So he's yelling at the screen, or will be when this publishes, I guarantee you. But this is a place where no elf has ever died. And this character, his mom dies in giving him birth. So he lives in a culture where nobody has ever died except for his mother giving birth to him. And his desire, you can see as it plays out, is to grasp and to hold and to not let go because it's so temporal. It's so here this second, gone tomorrow, in the twinkling of night. That's his understanding of the world.
Right.
And so he holds and holds and holds, and it corrupts him. His desires, his disordered desire corrupts him. And we could look at that and say it's evil, or we could say, oh no, he has a reason for this. This is how this came about.
There's I was listening to Switchfoot has a new song called Two Twins. And it struck me as being incredibly profound because most of us look at death through the lens of death. And it's in my opinion, masterful just turning this whole perspective on its head. Because there's just as much uncertainty before birth as there is before death. And many of the same questions that could be asked before death could be asked before birth. And so to this whole I think the whole question is most of us understand cognitively but struggle to understand experientially is that these experiences are pointing towards a birth, but there is not much known. There's not much certainty of who it is that will become, what life will be like on the other side of it. And really, the only thing that we have to hang our hat on is that, I mean, it's going back to this thread that recurs here is that he will be present with us in that. And we trust that somewhere along the way, it will be better than where we've been. But exactly how, we don't know.
Right.
And so,
And that demand for certainty, I think, is what drives the avoidance.
yeah,
We don't know.
we don't know. This also brings
We
to mind.
talk,
Go ahead.
we talk about a guy who's been through it. John Foreman, lead singer from Switchfoot, if you listen to his lyrics, to how he sings to interviews with him, that guy's been through it. What he's writing about, he's not writing about things he doesn't know.
Yeah.
He's writing about things he knows. One of the most profound, impactful songs to me that he wrote is called The Cure for Pain.
Mm-hmm.
And he has this line in there trying to figure out why broken cisterns could never stay full.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is the quintessential version of what it's like to be in pain.
Yeah. Yeah. If you really sit with that, there's something very Ecclesiastes-esque about that. It's when you're walking through pain, through loss, through grief, through and all the rest of the world is finding some kind of fulfillment in something.
Yeah.
Except for you.
It's a very Old Testament prophet kind of dynamic, right? you look around and you see people living their lives, apparently happy, fulfilled, whatever the case may be. And you're like, I don't see that. It's elusive to me, or what, however you characterize it. What do you do at that point? The the writer Paulo Coelho, he wrote a book called The Seven Mountains, and it's a retelling of the Elijah story. And he's a masterful writer. You can have your ideas on who he is as a person and his theology and all that kind of stuff, but master writer. And he tells the story about how Jezebel had sent people out to kill all the prophets of Israel. And he ends up surviving somehow and runs away and finds himself in the city and they don't trust him. And like it's just it puts meat on the bones of the story. And that it struck me because what you said is he like in this book, he's like, am I crazy? Like I must be crazy. Like I see these people living their lives and happy and doing or satisfied with whatever their daily life looks like, and that's just not me. It hasn't been me. Or Mitch Albom wrote this book. He's the guy who wrote Tuesdays with Maury and a lot of other, or the five people you see in heaven, that kind of thing. He wrote a book, and I think it's called The Liar, maybe something along those lines, but it tells this story about a Greek Jewish boy that when the Nazis invade and start taking people away, he helps them. So he's standing on the platform. He's the one in his family that actually survives. He partners with the Nazis in a very not intentional way, but in a very childish way, kind of thing. And he's standing on the train on the railroad station as the train takes away his community, his family. And he goes running down the tracks, chasing after, and can't catch the train. And he spends the rest of his life paying back that debt that he believes he had and becomes very insular, very successful, all those things. But it just haunts him, that decision he made. He's very alone. His desire, it seems to me, was for forgiveness, but he was never going to get it.
How do you, I mean, raises the question. I mean, I think this is maybe one of the most haunting, I mean, yeah, one of the most haunting things of the human experience is for these things that you know you will never get. And there's a million and one things that might be. It could be the approval of a parent or a loved one. It could be the last the last words. It could be a mended relationship. It could be physical or mental abilities that um, it's any number of things.
Right. whatever the hole is, whatever the wound is that we're trying to fill.
So then the question becomes, how do you live? And maybe the question around how do you live with desire is the same answer that to the question of how do you live with unfulfilled desires.
The same question.
Same question. And it's the same question either way. It's living with him present in the midst of that. It's us remaining present in the midst of that. There is a humble, um, I think, yeah, I don't know quite how to land on the exact words or concept, but there's an humble resourcefulness out of embracing the reality of the present. Um,
Going back to Ecclesiastes, what does he say at the end? At the end, this is all I know. Fear God, follow his commands. It's the only answer I can give you.
so how would you distinguish between, with those desires, unmet desires, between contentment and shutting off those desires?
Right.
Because they could look very similar on the surface.
Oh yeah, of course. Of course. I think that the difference is contentment says, I have this desire. I know you gave it to me. I trust you to fulfill it over time. There's hope.
Right.
I would say that's the difference. Versus, I know this is going to happen. I have to do such and such a thing to bring it about, and beating myself against that wall over and over, and I just get exhausted, beat up,
Right.
done.
Right.
And I
And
think the beautiful thing to me is God doesn't, my opinion, God doesn't look at that person that's beat themselves against that wall for decades and go, you fool, you should have just come to me. The grace and mercy and compassion for that soul.
yeah, yeah. There's something too about going back to the very beginning about the different paths, but there's something too about allowing him to form this, and something too about experiencing the losses is that the more you experience the losses, the more everything else becomes a gift.
Yeah. 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 Brennan Manning at the end of his life, his last book, it's called All Is Grace. Couldn't even write the book himself. He had to verbalize it, and then his, writing partner would write down what he said. Physically couldn't do it. Was crippled by his alcoholism. And that man wrote a book called All Is Grace, which is essentially his story, his autobiography. This is what my life is like. And you read it. And I remember the first time I read it was in the midst of a very dark season. And I was like, this is a very judgmental. This is a stupid title for this book. All is grace. Like, look at all this stuff. And now I sit and look at it and I go, the grace is that he was with him in all of it. And he never set him aside. He never said he wasn't worthy. He always used him. He says his favorite story in the whole Bible is in Luke 15, the prodigal son story. And you could almost wrap up his entire theology, his views on God from Luke 15. And the older I get and the more horrific mistakes I make and the more I get humbled and the more I follow disordered desires and that kind of thing, I have a tendency to agree with him.
Yeah.
All is grace.
Very true.
So can I receive the grace? I guess is the question. Can I receive the love?
I think maybe that's the question to just leave hanging in the air.
Yeah. Because neither you or I can answer that for anybody else.
Yeah.
We can only answer it for ourselves.
And sometimes
So we'll
barely.
leave you all to wrestle with that.
We'll leave you all to wrestle with that. Wow. That's not. All right. Most times it's very easy to wrap up. This one's not, but I think we'll just allow it to be uncomfortable and leave that question hanging.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for this conversation.
Thank you.
And all of you guys listening in, thank you for being a part of it in your own way. Appreciate it. Till next time.
Till we meet again.
Till we meet again.